The Salem witch trials in the United States aren't the only case of mass hysteria involving accusations of witchcraft. Far from it, witch trials were happening throughout Europe years before and years after. In September 1710, an old widow in Island McGee, Ireland, began experiencing bizarre, seemingly supernatural events. She'd claim stones would be thrown at her windows, only no one would be outside. Objects would vanish and reappear, and she'd find her bedsheets rearranged into the shape of a corpse. Then she claimed to see a demonic creature that ominously told her that she would die soon. Well, just a few months later, on February 21st of 1711, she died after being hit with intense stabbing pains in her back. The locals immediately suspected witchcraft, especially after a young girl named Mary Dunbar found an apron with the widow's bonnet, and soon after, strange happenings began to plague her as well. Mary started vomiting small objects, pins, buttons, and was said to have levitated above her bed. After weeks of torment, she named 8 local women as the culprits, claiming their spirit images had been visiting her. The town's clergy, led by Edward Clements, took these accusations very seriously and brought these women to court. There was no evidence, mind you, they were just going off of Mary's claims, but the women were sentenced to a year in prison, and during the trial they were attacked by an angry mob. One of the accused ended up losing an eye. Luckily, they weren't burnt at the stake, but the fact that all someone needed to do was make a statement with absolutely no evidence whatsoever, and 3 women landed themselves in jail for a year, is incredibly disturbing. Not as disturbing as these following cases, though. The 1612 Northampton witch trials started like so many others. Noble folk accusing common folk, mostly women, of witchcraft. The main accuser was Elizabeth Belcher, who didn't like a young woman named Joanne Brown. Elizabeth started claiming that Joanne had cursed her, and when Elizabeth fell ill, she was sure that this curse had to be real. Her brother William Avery even jumped on the bandwagon, saying he tried to visit Joanne's cottage to lift the curse, but was stopped by some strange invisible barrier. Joanne, her mother Agnes, and 4 others were arrested and sentenced to hang. The odds were stacked against them, as innocent until proven guilty wasn't exactly a thing at the time, especially when it came to accusations of witchcraft. Once you were accused, everyone just assumed you were guilty. Now, the story goes that before the hanging, William Avery was even allowed to enter the woman's cells and physically attack Agnes Brown, because it was believed that spilling a witch's BLOOD could lift her curses. The Scottish witch hunt of 1661 to 1662 was one of the deadliest witch hunts in history. It began in small areas around Edinburgh, where over 200 people were accused of witchcraft in just 9 months. This quickly spread across Scotland, and by the end of 1662, at least 660 people had been accused, and some reports say as many as 450 were executed, but that number may have been embellished over the years. Still though, a lot of people died. Some historians blame the witch hunt on the end of English rule in Scotland. Before 1660, English judges were more hesitant to prosecute suspected witches, but supposedly once they left, the Scottish authorities cracked down on supposed witchcraft harder. Not sure how I feel about that explanation. I feel like that might be some revisionist history, but church officials also did see the witch trial supposedly as a way to regain influence now that the English were gone again, supposedly. Eventually this died off, though. The witch trial stopped, mostly because non-religious authorities just got tired of the witch panic and finally put their foot down. In 1969, Tucson, Arizona, it was home to one of the strangest witch trials in history, mainly because this was 1969, not 1699. Ann Stewart was a teacher at Flowing Wells High School, where a folklore lecturer gave a talk at the school, and he went on to describe witches with traits like blonde hair, blue or green eyes, a widow's peak, a pointy left ear, and a fondness for, quote, devil's green clothing. Coincidentally, Stuart matched this description almost perfectly that day. And the students, of course, started joking around about it, and when one of them asked if she was a witch, Stuart replied, "What do you think?" Now, at first, Stuart had fun with the joke. She even encouraged students to explore astrology and dressed up as a witch for another folklore lesson. It was all just fun and games, but things quickly escalated and rumors started to spread. The school district wasn't amused, and in 1971, they fired her for passing herself off as a witch and, quote, teaching witchcraft. It was insane, and Stuart wasn't backing down. She took her case to court, and fortunately the judge ruled in her favor, ordering the school to reinstate her. Reflecting on the situation years later, Stuart was quoted saying, "I surely would have been burnt at the stake by now if this was 18th century Salem." In the 15th century, the remote Val Camonica region in northern Italy became the target of a brutal witch hunt. People were very isolated here. They didn't really know much about what went on outside of their small village. And in 1455, when an inquisitor visited, he was horrified by what he saw. He accused the locals of, quote, rejecting sacraments, emulating youths, and adoring the devil. It's unclear if these accusations were true, whether people were actually sacrificing their young. Probably not, but the Inquisition decided to step in. From 1505 to 1510, and again from 1518 to 1521, they carried out witch hunts. They forced confessions through torment and executed an estimated 100 people, many of whom were burnt alive as witches. In 1682, 3 women, Temperance Lloyd, Mary Trembles, and Susanna Edwards, were accused of witchcraft and executed. The trial also involved 2 other women who survived, probably because they were of higher social status. The 3 who died, though, were poor, unmarried, and lived off charity. They were the type of social outcasts at the time who were prime targets for accusations of witchcraft. Temperance, who'd been abandoned by her husband, sold apples to get by. And well, one day, a young rascal stole an apple and shortly after got sick, and that's when rumors started to spread about Temperance being a witch who poisoned or cursed the apple. And in July of 1682, Thomas Eastchurch accused her after his sister-in-law Grace Thomas fell ill. Eastchurch claimed that Temperance had confessed to witchcraft and had met a mysterious man believed to be the devil who had urged her to harm Grace. Then Mary Trembles and Susanna Edwards were accused after a woman named Grace Barnes blamed them for her own mysterious illness. Both women were accused of using magic to harm people, and the 3 women were tried together and found guilty. They were hanged on August 25th, 1682. After their deaths, their bodies were dumped in unconsecrated ground, now part of a car park near the University of Exeter, which actually offers a master's degree in witchcraft now. In 1645, Bury St. Edmunds in Suffolk was the site of England's largest witch trial, where 18 people were hanged. Matthew Hopkins was known as the Witchfinder General, later to be played by Vincent Price in the 1968 historical horror film, Witchfinder General. Anyway, he and his team were responsible for 124 witch trials in Suffolk alone in that year. Most of the accused were poor elderly women, but men and wealthier citizens weren't always safe either. One of the victims you wouldn't typically associate with witchcraft was an 80-year-old reverend named John Lowes. After a violent interrogation, he was convicted and hanged as a witch. So you can only imagine how easy it was for old widowed outcasts to fall to baseless accusations like this. This was a pretty chaotic time in England. It was right in the middle of the English Civil War, and there had been an official law against witchcraft at the time. So the Witchfinder General, Matthew Hopkins, saw an opportunity to profit off of this, turning witch hunting into a lucrative business. In the 17th century, northern Moravia, now part of the Czech Republic, hundreds of women were burnt at the stake. One of the creepiest cases started when an altar boy saw an old woman pocket her communion bread instead of eating it. When the priest confronted her, she explained that she was going to give it to her cow. The priest wasn't happy about this. In fact, he was highly suspicious of the woman. He suspected her of witchcraft and decided to report her to the local judge. This set off a chain reaction of trials and executions. The judges who made money from sentencing people to death were coincidentally pretty enthusiastic about finding more witches to kill. They gathered accusations from the public and used torment to force confessions. The hunt spiraled out of control, and over 100 people could be executed in one single trial. Eventually, the ruling class in the area started to get worried because the witch panic was spreading and it was getting a little too close to home, so they pressured their government to end the trials, and finally the witch hunts came to an end. The Trier witch trials took place from 1582 to 1594 in Germany. The region had been suffering from years of bad weather and poor harvests, and the public wanted someone to blame, so why not witches? The trials were pushed by a man named Peter Binsfeld, a bishop turned witch hunter. Now, witch hunts typically targeted vulnerable old women, as we've discussed throughout this video, but that wasn't the case here. Here, no one was safe. Even when Trier's deputy governor, Judge Dr. Dietrich Flade, tried to stop all the madness, he was tormented into confessing and was burnt at the stake. Over the course of the trials, at least 368 people were burnt alive. One of the few to escape execution was Cornelius Loos, a scholar who spoke out against the witch trials. He wrote a book protesting them, but the manuscript was seized and Loos was imprisoned. But he managed to get freed in 1593. He moved to Brussels and was then imprisoned once again for his anti-witch hunt stance. In 1612, 12 people from the area around Pendle Hill in Lancashire were accused of witchcraft, and their trials are some of the most infamous in English history. They were charged with the deaths of 10 people supposedly caused by witchcraft. Most of the accused came from two families, Elizabeth Southerns and her daughter Elizabeth Devis, along with their extended family, and Anne Whittle and her daughter Anne Redfern. There were also a few others like Jane Bulcock, Alice Nutter, and Janet Preston. Bulcock and Alice Nutter, that's a funny pair of names to put right together. I am very talented. Alright, the allegations were wild. People accused these people of using witchcraft to make people sick or just outright kill them, based on the fact that some of these people practiced traditional healing or fortune telling. And 10 of the accused were found guilty and hanged, and they weren't allowed any defense or witnesses speak on their behalf, so of course they lost. And today in Pendle, you'll find statues dedicated to these women and even a museum on the history of the Lancashire witch trials. What would you do if you spotted this on your security camera? Okay, just your, average nightly broom dance / ritual woman. This footage was captured in South Africa on April 11th, 2021. That's pretty much all I know about it. If there's anyone from South Africa watching and you know more about this video or what this person is doing, please let me know. All I can say is that even if this person is not a witch, I'd still be very creeped out if I was walking around at night and came across someone doing this. Is this person just messing around? Are they not mentally well? Are they performing some type of ritual I'm just not aware of? Or could this be a genuine witch caught on camera? All incredibly important questions that I wish I could answer. So this is amazing. Take a look at this still image here. Looks like a dark satanic ritual is taking place. Either that or it's a super spooky D&D session. Well, no, it actually is a satanic ritual, but the best part is where it showed up, which was on the news. And not on purpose either. In 2021, an Australian newscaster named Yvonne Young was covering a story about a police dog that was attacked in Brisbane and, some new piece of legislation that was coming out of it. Anyway, suddenly the camera briefly cuts to this bizarre piece of footage. Let's watch how this played out. I just love this. Regular news footage of dudes in suits, story about laws and legislation, hail Satan, then back to the previous story. I love how she just sits there motionless for a brief moment, like looking clearly confused about what she's just seen, and then she just gets right back into it. Truly professional. I probably wouldn't have been able to maintain my composure. I would be on the floor laughing. This next video comes from a Lebanese YouTuber and urban explorer named Mr. Hearth. He was exploring in an abandoned home late at night when he came across something that nobody would ever want to find. Now, the carpet moving on its own like that is spooky enough on its own, right? But that was far from the end of it. He starts to pray as this dark figure begins peering out at him from a door frame. Loud banging noises are heard, and then we get this. He also spots a cloaked figure roaming around in the shadows, clearly performing some kind of ritual in the darkness. I love the part where that flame shoots up though. That's really cool, even if it's fake. In a wild story out of Canada, a nurse and nature enthusiast named Corinnia Stanhope from Powell River captured some very bizarre footage on a trail camera she set up near her home. After finding a deer carcass in her garden, she wanted to see what animals might come sniffing around. Little did she know she'd catch something much stranger on camera. Corinnia and her 76-year-old grandpa Bob had already spotted a bobcat in the footage, which was cool, but when Bob checked the camera later, he was in for a bit of a shock. In Stanhope's own words, "I came the next day and Grandpa said he'd got naked people on the camera, and I said, no, you didn't." So he showed me. What they saw were two women, almost nude, performing what appeared to be a carcass-eating ritual right in their backyard. The woman came out about 10 minutes after sunset, looking disheveled and wearing what looked like wigs, and you can't really tell from the photos, but the hoof was brought right up to her mouth, Corinnia said. "I don't know if she was kissing it, smelling, or eating it, but to touch a decaying carcass like that makes me feel sick. The amount of bacteria that must have been on there," she continued, and then said maybe they were paying their respects, but they were naked. Now, this all happened just a 2-minute walk from her house, which is kind of unsettling. From YouTuber Guanajuato Paranormal Oficio comes a pretty unsettling piece of footage. Clearly these guys showed up at the wrong brick hut in the middle of an empty field. Well, actually they had come to the right place. They were looking for scary stuff. The site they were setting out to explore is often referred to by locals as the Witch's Room, where tons of urban legends about strange rituals are said to take place. Now, as they got closer to the small building, you can clearly see candlelight illuminating it. But when they get inside, things get much creepier. Yeah, oh my god is right, a circle of candles with a voodoo doll in the middle. Get the hell out of there. Well, they didn't. They just kept looking around, and I bet they're glad they did, because then they spot this thing creeping on them. "Now, come here," he says. No, don't come here. Stay there. Or move very far away. Either that's a ghoul, or that lady is just really old. What you're looking at here is supposedly a space where Aleister Crowley carried out some of his occultist rituals. A group of explorers called Lost Adventures set out to investigate this old, isolated farmhouse in Cornwall where Aleister Crowley once resided, apparently. The self-proclaimed Great Beast owned Carn Cottage, located between St. Ives and St. Just, and it's thought that he used the place as a hub for some of his occult activities. Now, we can clearly see graffiti on the walls, symbols and lines on the floor, candles left behind. Clearly people had come here to perform rituals in the years since Crowley was using the place. The urban explorers said they thought satanic rituals were going on here, and maybe that's the case, but not by the signs of what we're seeing here. Clearly this does not look like satanic at all to me, but still a pretty spooky find. In 2016, YouTuber Dateline420 posted a video of something really creepy he came across while hiking through the woods in Suffolk County, New York. Found a whole bunch of missing persons posters, but they were taped up to trees. And not only that, he also came across a huge bundle of tree branches latched together to form what looked like a cage. It was a pretty disturbing sight to come across while walking alone through the woods, and the location also made it kind of freaky because the area was surrounded by hills, so if you did need to run away, you'd have a tough time. He also stated that people could always hide on top of those hills and throw stuff down at you. Being in a ditch area, it's just not a good place to be if you're in trouble. Authorities were contacted and they investigated. Owners of the property nearby said they were setting up for a Halloween party, but are we buying that, or was there something more mysterious and nefarious going on here? This next one's a little different than the standard robed, candlelit rituals you're picturing when you hear the word witch, but it's just so darn tootin' creepy that I had to include it. Take a look at this. Alright, so someone's driving down a desolate road late at night, but as you can see, the road isn't actually that desolate. Suddenly, a dude in a suit holding a briefcase appears by the side of the road. Okay, Unsettling, but not the end of the world. But then, things just get stranger. Turns out there are tons of these pale, suited figures lurking in the tall grass by the side of the road. Not something you expect to see while driving along a road in the middle of nowhere at night, nor would you want to. And it doesn't even end there. As this camera person continues to drive, they spot another figure, this one holding a flare. So just what in the hell were these guys doing out there? Clearly they're gathered for some sort of reason, and my hunch is that it wasn't good. People don't usually gather around at night in identical outfits out in the woods with good intentions. Unless you're like a Boy Scout or like rural police or something. I don't know. This next video isn't actually available on YouTube anymore as it was too gruesome to stay up, but we do have some clips. If anyone knows more about this one, let me know down below, please. So this creepy piece of supposed found footage was recorded in 1949 and shows a group of Satanists sacrificing a man before attempting to resurrect him. Yes, attempting. It's a lot easier to kill someone than it is to bring them back to life, as it turns out, even with the power of the devil on your side. We watch as they draw a pentagram on the floor, prepare the sacrificial victim by bathing him, then he drinks something out of a cup, and then they kill him before laying him on the pentagram. Is this one real? Is it a hoax? A clip from a movie? I don't know, but from what I've seen, this is a pretty unsettling video. There's something about old footage like this that just always makes you uneasy. Well, this witch was just climbing a tree in the middle of the night when these annoying dudes showed up to film her. Take a look at this, just drives me nuts. The witch is cackling, but I mean, is this a laugh of genuine joy? Or is it a laugh of anger and fear? All she was trying to do was enjoy her night in a tree alone in peace, and people couldn't help but gawk and disturb her. No wonder she got all manic. I don't know where this video is from. Anyway, I'm guessing somewhere in South America, but again, if anyone knows more about it, let me know down
in the early 1600s, Germany was gripped by the terrifying witch hunts that swept across Europe, and one of the most chilling cases involved the Pappenheimer family. Accused of being part of a witches' coven, this family faced unspeakable horrors during the Bavarian witch trials. Tormented beyond imagination, they were forced to confess to outrageous crimes, including making pacts with the devil and practicing dark magic. Their public execution was as brutal as it was tragic, serving as a grim reminder of how easily fear and superstition can spiral out of control. The Pappenheimer family's fate is a haunting example of the hysteria that led to the deaths of hundreds of innocent people during this dark chapter in history. Can you imagine living in a time where even a whisper of suspicion could lead to such a gruesome end? In our number 9 spot today, we have the Pendle Witches. In 1612, a small village in Lancashire, England, became the setting for one of the most notorious witch trials in British history, the case of the Pendle Witches. 12 people, mostly women, were accused of being part of a witches' coven, practicing black magic, casting hexes, and consorting with dark forces. Their alleged crimes ranged from cursing livestock to causing death through sorcery. The trial was a spectacle of fear and superstition, and in the end, 10 of the accused were found guilty and hanged. The Pendle Witches' tale still sends shivers down the spine today, blending folklore with real historical events. How many innocent people were caught up in the frenzy of fear? The legend of the Pendle Witches endures, a chilling reminder of the dangers of paranoia and the dark fascination people have always had with the supernatural. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Salem Witch Coven. The Salem witch trials of 1692 stand as one of the darkest chapters in American history, where fear and paranoia gripped a small Puritan community in Massachusetts. Accusations of witchcraft spread like wildfire, with dozens of individuals, mainly women, suspected of forming secret covens and practicing devil worship. The idea of witches meeting in shadowy gatherings, casting spells, and consorting with Satan became a terrifying obsession. In the frenzy, 20 people were executed and many more were imprisoned, their lives shattered by false accusations. Strangely, there was never any real evidence of these supposed covens or dark rituals, but the fear was enough to destroy lives. The Salem witch trials remind us how dangerous unchecked hysteria can be, and they still haunt the imagination of generations who wonder what really drove the madness. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Witches of Abiquiu. In the 1760s, the remote village of Abiquiu, New Mexico, became the unlikely stage for a series of witch trials, where a group of indigenous women were accused of forming a witches' coven. These women, known for their deep understanding of local herbal remedies and healing practices, were suddenly cast in a much darker light. Their knowledge, rooted in indigenous American spirituality, clashed with the religious fervor of Spanish colonists who believed these women were practicing witchcraft. The trials painted their traditional healing techniques as malevolent acts tied to sorcery. These accusations weren't just about fear of magic, they reflected the tension between cultures, with indigenous traditions being misunderstood and demonized. Can you imagine how quickly fear and suspicion could twist something as benign as healing into a supposed act of dark magic? In our number 6 spot today, we have the Coven of Witches of Zugarramurdi. In 1610, the quiet town of Zugarramurdi in the Basque region of Spain became the epicenter of one of the most chilling witch hunts in Spanish history. These witches were accused of forming a large coven that gathered in nearby caves to conduct dark rituals and worship Satan himself. These caves, shrouded in mystery and superstition, were said to be the site of wild gatherings where witches flew through the night and made pacts with the devil. When the Spanish Inquisition caught wind of these rumors, an investigation was launched, leading to a brutal trial. Many of the accused women were executed or imprisoned, their alleged coven becoming the stuff of legend. Even today, the caves carry an eerie reputation, and the story of these women continues to haunt the region. Would you dare to visit a place said to be the meeting ground for witches centuries ago? These witches remain a symbol of how fear and folklore can turn an ordinary place into a site of supernatural dread. In 16th and 17th century Italy, the Benandanti were a mysterious group who claimed to use their powers for good, believing they were protectors who battled witches to defend their communities. They engaged in strange, trance-like rituals, even claiming to have out-of-body experiences where they fought evil forces in the spirit realm. While the Benandanti saw themselves as warriors against witchcraft, the Catholic Church viewed them with deep suspicion. Their unusual practices, instead of being celebrated, were seen as evidence of dark magic, leading to accusations that they were a part of a witches' coven. Several members were put on trial for witchcraft, their good intentions lost in the church's growing fear of anything supernatural. The story of the Benandanti shows just how easily the lines between good and evil could blur during times of superstition and fear. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Coven of Bideford. In 1682, the quiet town of Bideford in Devon, England, became the site of one of the last witch trials in the country. 3 women, Temperance Lloyd, Susanna Edwards, and Mary Trembles, were accused of forming a witches' coven and using their dark powers to bring illness and death to their community. Local suspicions, fueled by fear and superstition, quickly spiraled into accusations of black magic, and the 3 women found themselves on trial for their lives. Despite flimsy evidence, the women were convicted of witchcraft and hanged, becoming the last known people executed for witchcraft in England. Their case remains one of the few examples of a supposed coven being legally prosecuted in the country. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Torshucker witch trials. In 1675, the peaceful Swedish province of Angermanland became the site of one of the most brutal and widespread witch hunts in European history, the Torshucker witch trials. During this terrifying period, 71 people, both men and women, were accused of being part of a witches' coven and performing satanic rituals. The allegations centered on the belief that these witches were abducting children and taking them to the mythical island of Blackula, or Blue Hill, where they would supposedly serve the devil. The panic that followed led to the horrifying beheading and burning of the accused, turning the Torstucker trials into a very dark chapter of Swedish history. The sheer scale and savagery of the trials left a haunting legacy that still lingers today. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Würzburg and Bamberg witch trials. Between 1626 and 1631, the cities of Würzburg and Bamberg in the Holy Roman Empire became the epicenter of some of the most terrifying witch hunts in European history. During this period, over 1,000 people, including high-ranking officials, were accused of being a part of a witches' coven engaged in demonic rituals. The hysteria swept through the region like wildfire, with accusations flying and executions becoming almost routine. Political instability, religious conflict, and a fear of famine created the perfect storm for suspicion and panic. Entire families were caught in the crosshairs, leading to brutal executions by burning. The scale and savagery of the trials made them infamous examples of how fear of the supernatural can lead to mass persecution. This dark chapter in history reveals just how deep the paranoia ran, with no one safe from the flames of suspicion. And finally, rounding out our list in our number 1 spot, we have the Isabel Gowdy Coven. In 1662, Isabel Gowdy, a Scottish woman, delivered one of the most fantastical and detailed confessions of witchcraft in history, sparking intrigue and fear. Unlike many accused witches, her confessions were given voluntarily and without the use of torment, making her story even more unusual. Isabel claimed to be part of a witches' coven that met regularly to cast spells, shapeshift into animals, and even consort with the devil himself. She described flying on broomsticks and participating in wild supernatural rituals, painting a vivid picture of witchcraft that seemed straight out of folklore. What makes her case particularly strange is the sheer depth and imagination of her confessions, far beyond what many others accused of witchcraft ever described. Despite this, no record of Isabel's execution exists, leaving her fate a mystery. Can you think about how her words must have captivated and definitely terrified her audience at the same time? The tale of Isabel Gowdy remains one of the most fascinating windows into the eerie world of witch trials, where reality and superstition blurred in very haunting ways.
The video shows this rusted white van parked outside, and in the background you can hear this strange noise, almost sounds like an animal whimpering or crying. As the clip goes on, something weird appears in the sky and starts moving toward the van. The person filming this is hiding behind some curtains, rightfully so, trying to get a look at what's happening. And when they finally peek out again, they see a cloaked, witch-like figure standing on top of the car, staring right at the camera with glowing eyes. It starts to move closer, floating down from the car. It almost looks like it's swimming through the air. It's very eerie. And that's when the person filming freaks out and runs away from the window, understandably. Now, this clip has gone viral, with people on social media trying to figure out where it was filmed. Some say it was shot near a crematorium in Bihar, while others claim it's from Beirut, and also near a crematorium. It's a quality video for sure, but what do you all think? Is this one a hoax or a genuine piece of paranormal footage? All I know is it's creepy. So you can all thank me later for this terrifying thing showing up in your dreams tonight. Yeah, you're welcome. Just what in the hell is that thing? Well, there's not a lot of info on this video, but there is a vague internet urban legend behind it. Supposedly, a girl was kidnapped by an elderly woman. The girl ended up showing up again, but was in this state, almost like a living doll, a very creepy living doll. Sounds like something a witch would do to me. Grab a young person, do some spells on them, turn them into whatever this is. Now, whether there's any truth to that story or not, I don't care. It's a creepy video, and I will probably be seeing this thing when I close my eyes in bed tonight, unfortunately. How would you react if you saw this peeking out of your attic? Yeah, I wouldn't feel all that good about it myself. So a lot of people have said they think this video could be faked, but there is actually a real news story behind it. This happened in Poland on New Year's Eve in 2022. Police were called to a home in a small village. A woman named Kamilka had barricaded herself in the attic, making odd animalistic growling noises. Some say she'd been messing with a Ouija board before she started acting all strange, and then her family got concerned and phoned the police. And when authorities got there, they found her in a small crawl space or attic space. She was refusing to cooperate with police. In fact, she wasn't really saying anything. She was just growling at them. It's an unsettling video for sure, especially with context. And some of these growling noises really do sound like something out of The Exorcist. Take a listen. And just for warning, if you're epileptic, you may want to look away for this next bit. Hey, there's nothing wrong with a late night dance, nothing wrong with dancing alone, but would it be slightly unsettling to see this at 3 a.m. in the morning? Well, yes, it would be unsettling, and it was for the dude who captured this footage. He'd been making a late night delivery at an apartment complex when he spotted this person dancing alone. Now, there's a lot that could be going on here. She looks like she might be elderly. Who knows what kind of mental state she's in, but I'm sorry, it's still eerie. The witch-like silhouette, the strangeness of the movements, she's got really big hands. The fact that it was 3 a.m. in the morning, yeah, it's freaky. I mean, even seeing an average-looking person dancing alone in the middle of the night in a hypnotic trance would be creepy. So this just takes it up a notch. Once again, thank me for the nightmares later. Take a look at this. Ah yes, a face only a mother could love. If Mama were a demonic witch lady who brewed her offspring in a cauldron in the woods, just what in the seven hells spawned this horrific creature? Here's this demon girl telling the camera person to shut up, by the way, later in the video. So, word to the wise here, I don't know if you need me to tell you this, but if something like that is screaming in your face telling you to shut up, just zip your mouth and then just slowly start backing away and hope she doesn't follow you. Ever had a wonderful, restless night of sleep paralysis and then woke up in the morning wondering if some sort of dark entity really was in bed with you the previous night? We've all been there, right? There are said to be lots of different sleep paralysis demons, the most famous, or rather infamous, being the old hag. Cultures around the world have stories about ghostly old hags sitting on sleepers' chests, restricting them from moving, haunting their semi-waking nightmares, very witch-like entities. Well, this person may have captured one of these sleep paralysis demons on camera. Take a look. So that ghostly looking thing sitting up in bed is not the person sleeping, at least according to the uploader. Supposedly, a woman had been living in her home for a few years and had been having issues with sleep apnea and sleep paralysis. Someone suggested she put up a security camera in her room, and she did. This is what she captured. I also hope she went to a doctor and they gave her some, medication. You don't want to ignore sleep apnea, guys. It's not a good thing. It'll affect you throughout your life. La Llorona, a ghostly sort of witchy entity in Mexican folklore, a vengeful, dangerous spirit who brings misfortune to whoever comes across her. Well, I feel bad for these people in that case. So a father and daughter were walking alone at night when they spotted something squatting on the hood of their truck. The father starts to approach as his daughter Naomi pleads with him not to get any closer to it, but for the sake of good content, how can he ignore it? He does. He walks closer and captures this dark demonic figure on top of the car holding what looks to be an infant. The thing just stares at the pair with glowing yellow eyes, cackling and making these eerie growling noises. It's quite the predicament to be in, really. You just hop into the safety of your car and gun it, hoping La Llorona takes a tumble off the hood, or do you retreat into the night and try and walk home, hoping she doesn't try and follow you? I don't know. I've never faced this situation before. Hope I never do. What's up with the female passenger in this truck? There's something definitely off about her, right? Now, aside from her kinda ghostly appearance, there's a creepy story behind this clip. The footage was taken inside a truck in Mexico. Late at night on March 31st of 2024, a trucker was making a run to the city of Monterrey. The company supervisor was checking in on him using a remote camera, and to his shock, he saw what looked like a woman in old-timey clothes, some say more like 80s clothes, sitting right next to the driver. Now, at first, the supervisor was just kind of irritated. See, he thought the driver had picked up a passenger, which was against company policy, understandably. So the supervisor messaged the driver about it, being like, "What's up with this woman in your truck?" And the driver just looked at his phone and brushed it off. He thought his supervisor was just messing with him, so he continued along with his drive. When he got to his destination, though, the supervisor showed him the dashcam footage, and the driver could not believe what he was seeing. He was adamant that no one was with him during the trip, but there was this woman sitting next to him the entire time. Classic urban legend kind of story. I love ghost stories about people picking up ghost passengers along the road. Always get under my skin. This next one is like something out of Children of the Corn. Take a look. Definitely looks like two cloaked figures performing some sort of ritual. Not the type of thing I'd like to see in the middle of the night alone. The uploader said, "I heard mysterious sounds surrounding the Alps near my village. I am a migrant worker. I followed the sound and came across strange tall figures standing 3.5 meters high. They were moving, what looked like either wings, maybe they were angels. They seemed to be conducting a ritual around a lightning rod. Those rods harbor a lot of energy. Maybe they were gaining energy from that rod. I was scared, but on the other hand, I didn't feel threatened. Still, to see those huge figures in the darkness through misty rain with only my phone's light was amazing. This is something that has completely changed my life and view on life, and now I understand that we really are not the only intelligent beings on this planet." The only thing scarier than a regular-sized witch is, an extra tall witch. Take a look at this thing. Yeah, I don't like that. Someone captured this nightmare fuel on the security camera outside their home. Something was crouching and peering at their house from the bushes. A spindly creature with pale skin and glowing eyes. A lot of people say this thing looks like the Slender Man or a rake. The rake creature, not like the tool, obviously. And when it stands up, you really see how tall it is, and I can definitely see the resemblance. But I also do get a kind of witchy vibe here. It almost looks like it might be wearing a black cloak that covers most of its torso. But the featureless face, bald head, and the glowing eyes, it does definitely give off more of a Slender Man feel. Whatever, if I saw that on my home security camera, I'd be packing up my bags right away. I'd sell my home for, $100 if I needed to, and I'd just be on the road.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have The Witch in the Cave. This video starts out in an already creepy way, witch or not. It starts in a cave. It appears as though two men are searching through this cave. They are speaking to each other, and they seem fairly calm, but definitely like something is in the air. I'm not quite sure why they were in the cave in the first place, but their voices are low. They have a flashlight out to cut through the darkness of the cave, and they definitely sound like they are looking for something. After a few seconds, it appears as though the men found maybe not what they were looking for, but they definitely found something. As they walk to a lighter area of the cave where we see some very creepy looking graffiti, we also get a glimpse of a hooded creature that quickly takes off as the men see it. This creature moves in a mysterious way. When slowed down, it looks like the creature basically just jumps up and takes flight, much like a witch would. This footage is just downright weird, and now that you've seen the footage, I ask, what do you think that it was? In our number 9 spot today, we have the flying witch in Mexico. This footage is weird, and I don't have an explanation for it because it really looks like a witch flying on a broomstick. 'Tis the season, I suppose. There isn't much backstory to go off of with this footage, but what I do know is that this incident supposedly took place in Mexico, which honestly wouldn't have been my first guess as to where the witches were hanging out. This footage is pretty grainy and shaky and has a date stamp of 2006, so the footage has definitely been around for a while, and still it doesn't appear like anyone has debunked it. The footage features what I mentioned earlier. It looks like a witch who is flying away. The witch lands and walks for a bit before taking flight once again. Honestly, This video just might have me convinced. In our number 8 spot today, we have La Llorona. Less of a witch creature and more of a character from mythology, this next terrifying video is unlike anything I have ever seen before. This video is said to be footage of La Llorona, or the Weeping Woman. The roots of the Weeping Woman's legend trace back to pre-Columbian times, with some scholars linking her to an Aztec goddess associated with motherhood, fertility, and war. With the arrival of the Spanish and the subsequent blending of culture, the tale evolved, absorbing elements from European folklore and Catholic morality tales. The most common version of her story tells of a woman named Maria, who, in a fit of rage and despair after being betrayed by her husband, she tragically ends the lives of her own offspring in a river. Overcome by grief, she realizes her horrific act too late, and unable to find them in the afterlife, she is condemned to roam the earth eternally. As a ghostly figure, she wanders near bodies of water, weeping and searching for her lost children while crying out, "Oh, my children." All that being said, this video definitely depicts a terrifying and weeping woman. What do you think? In our number 7 spot today, we have the deer. Corinnia Stanhope, a nurse from British Columbia, thought she'd caught a typical woodland scene when she set up a camera near her home to keep an eye on wildlife. But what her trail cam captured instead was anything but ordinary. Instead of animals, she and her 76-year-old grandpa were horrified to find footage of what appeared to be 2 women, some say witches, having a very bizarre late-night feast on a deer carcass. To make things weirder, the women were nearly naked, and at one point, one even lifted a hoof to her mouth. As Corinnia said, "I don't know if she was kissing it, smelling it, or eating it, but whatever it was gross." Understandably, this creepy occurrence had her worried for her horses, who had been spooked in that area before. Some online theorists suggested skinwalkers, others blamed illicit substances, but whatever the case, I think we can probably all agree this is not the kind of trail cam footage you expect to find in your backyard. Would you be brave enough to check that camera the next morning? In our number 6 spot today, we have the TikTok witch. TikTok is a great place, a great app. There's funny videos, interesting videos. My favorite recent trend is the subtle foreshadowing trend. TikTok is also sometimes a place where my For You page curates some of the most horrifying, upsetting things I've ever seen, and this video is definitely one of those moments. This TikTok has 10 million plays, and for good reason. Let me just show you before I say anything else. What is that? What is happening? Is that a creature? Is it special effects makeup? Is it AI, Photoshop, CGI? I have about 45 questions and absolutely no answers. In our number 5 spot today, we have the creepy creature. I'll be honest, this video is similar to the last one, but possibly more terrifying. This video gives us a better glimpse at a very similar looking creature that is in the same position as the last TikTok witch. People in the comments are honestly really debated over what this creature could be. Some are of course saying a witch, many people believe it might be a skinwalker, and some are even saying that it is an evil spirit from Islamic folklore. A skinwalker in certain indigenous American cultures is defined, quote, as a type of harmful witch who has the ability to turn into, possess, or disguise themselves as an animal. The term is never used for healers. As for the evil spirit, it is said that they go around, quote, inciting humans to sin by whispering in their hearts. According to Islamic tradition, though invisible to humans, they are imagined to be ugly and grotesque creatures created from hellfire. So now I have to ask that you've seen these 2 videos, what do you think this really is? In our number 4 spot today, I have the creature in the sky. This video was posted to TikTok with the caption, quote, "I am honestly really creeped out by this footage that I got from yesterday," and it features the hashtags witch, alien, and demon, which, yeah, I think those definitely are all possibilities when it comes to this footage. In the video, we see something flying through the sky that honestly looks like it could be the concept art for the alien in the movie Nope. This thing is like a jellyfish dementor floating through the sky. What could this thing really be? This is definitely one of the stranger videos that I have ever seen, and at the end of the video, after saying that they still, to this day, have no idea what that thing is, the creator asks, "What do you think it is?" In our number 3 spot today, we have the fireball in the sky. A Seconia, or a Lugaroo, is a vampire witch from Caribbean folklore. She is said to live as an elderly woman during the day, but at night she sheds her skin and transforms into a fireball. In this form, she flies through the air and slips into the homes of sleeping people to feed on their blood. Some believe that this creature, in her fireball form, was caught on camera in this video. During the video, you can see quite a large fireball floating in the sky. You can see the flames moving as the person recording the video zooms in and out to give us as much of a view as possible. It isn't exactly known where this video was taken, but what is clear is that it caught something that seems almost unexplainable. Do you believe that this could be a witch, or is there another, more scientific explanation? In our number 2 spot today, we have the structure in the forest. This is a video that is definitely giving Blair Witch vibes. It starts off with a man walking through a forest in Massachusetts, and he starts recording when he sees something strange. As he is walking, he sees some strange small structures made out of sticks and branches. As he gets closer and begins filming the structures and inspecting them more, he realizes that he in fact has stumbled upon a creepy hut built by someone or something. I've watched enough horror movies to know that this means it's time to get the hell out of there, because you definitely don't want to meet the thing that built this creepy hut of sticks in the forest. Actually, I probably wouldn't even be in the forest in the first place, but this man is clearly braver than I, and now he has to face the music. While this video is already creepy enough, what's great is that the creepiest thing hasn't even happened yet. Suddenly, what definitely appears to be a witch starts running through the woods, almost like she was startled, and ran away while trying not to be seen. The man who recorded the video said that she was also carrying a stick with her. I don't know if that's important, but that feels very witchy to just have a stick on the go. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have The Ritual. As drones get increasingly popular, so do the strange things they capture, and this drone footage is no exception. As the pilot flew this drone through a field, he encountered something that I don't think anyone was expecting. The video footage captures 3 men in a field, all wearing cloaks and masks, and they appear to be doing some kind of ritual. They also appear to be holding some kind of object, possibly a book. Shout out to the drone operator, because like a good cameraman, he goes in closer to try and get a better look at what exactly is going on here. As he gets closer, the men begin holding hands and bowing to each other, and something weird is definitely going on here. Am I being punked, or is this real? In the end, the men end up noticing the drone, which takes them out of whatever they were doing. Once the men notice the camera, one of them reaches his hand up toward it, and at this point, the pilot said that he lost control of the drone, which is a very strange coincidence. Or is it magic?
Coming up in our number 10 spot, we have Julia Brown. Now, Julia Brown is from a small town in Louisiana, and she was known to be a pretty terrifying witch in her time. She became known as a witch because she would perform spells and had charms, and yes, she would place curses on people. Yeah, this is a real person, folks. Apparently, she would perform rituals for people in the town and do spells for them, and eventually they began to take advantage of her, and that is when things took a turn. She started to tell people that bad things were going to happen to them. She would make predictions for them, such as tell them their death dates, and that really creeped a lot of people out. She loved to sing, and at some point she created a song about how she was going to get revenge on the town when she died. "When I die, I'm taking the town with me," she sang. Well, as you might have already guessed, when she died, she certainly got revenge on the town. As her casket was being lowered, rain fell on the town, and that rain eventually turned into a hurricane that wiped out the town. Yep, she might be scarier than a demon. It's possible. In our number 9 spot, we have Moll Dyer. It is unclear if Moll Dyer was a real person or if she was just a legend. People say that she was real, however, there have been no documents to prove this to date, so for the purpose of this video, we are going to say she was probably real. And by real, I mean a real witch, a real scary witch. Moll lived in Maryland in the 17th century. She apparently had tormentors when she was alive and put a curse on them before she died. She died running away from them and froze to death on a rock that the town still displays today, as apparently you can still see her handprint on the rock. The ancestors of her tormentors apparently are all cursed with bad luck. Well, all I can say is I would not want to marry into one of their families. Also, how do we know that they are still cursed with bad luck if they are, born and then told that they are cursed with bad luck? Because maybe they have attracted it now because they believe that they have bad luck. I say those people need to leave the town, forget this legend, and see if the next generation has bad luck, and then we will have proof if this curse has actually continued. Moll was spoken about in the famous movie The Blair Witch Project, in which I have not seen, but probably should. In our number 8 spot, we have Kate Batts. This is probably one of the scariest witches on this list. Kate Batts was a neighbor to a man named John Bell and apparently was a witch tormenting John and his family from her grave. Very powerful. John and his daughter Betsy were tormented in many different ways. Betsy was attacked apparently by an unknown force, and they would both hear chain sounds and always feel on edge. Eventually, the entity that was tormenting them told them that she was their former neighbor, Kate Batts, and that she was going to destroy their family. Eventually, John was found dead with a small vial of liquid beside him, believed to be poison from Kate the entity. Apparently, she stopped tormenting the family after John passed. Why she was tormenting the family is unknown, but perhaps it was because John did something bad to her when she was alive. That's the only explanation I can think of. Perhaps his guilty conscience could have concocted the whole story. That feels possible as well. In our number 7 spot, we have Gerald Gardner. Known as the creator of Wicca, a religious version of witchcraft, Gerald Gardner is arguably scarier than a demon to some, but perhaps just an egotistical man to most. In 1954, he wrote a book called Witchcraft Today, and it became widely popular around the world, and it helped pave the way for more widespread acceptance of witchcraft. So even though that has done a lot of good for the community, he is a bit of a controversial character that may have caused harm as well. A lot of people are angry at the fact that he became known as the founder of Wicca when he himself did not actually find it. He just wrote a book about it and then got credited for it. This has angered many witches around the world, and many people are frustrated that he has claimed the title of founder when he indeed is not. Nobody likes a faker, and it does not do any good for the religion to have its leader be dishonest. Coming up in our number 6 spot, we have La Voisine. Catherine, aka La Voisine, was a witch in the 1600s in France who would do spells, mix potions, and tell fortunes to the townspeople. Apparently, she would hold black masses and she would channel the devil. She really grew to fame when she discovered that a lot of wives wanted their husbands to pass away, and so she created potions to help them do so. She gained quite a bit of fortune from these potions. After some time, she became more and more dark as she began to take the lives of innocent people as a sacrifice for the devil, and eventually she was arrested for killing many people and she was, burned at the stake. This woman seems absolutely terrifying, and I am so glad that I live in 2022 and not the 16th century. Definitely seems more terrifying than a demon. On second thought, perhaps she was actually one. In our number 5 spot, we have Agnes Sampson. Agnes was a well-known healer in her time, which was around 1590, when the King of Scotland single-handedly started the witch trials around the world due to his paranoia over witches and his belief that a witch was the cause for a few big storms in Scotland. Talk about paranoid. Heesh. Anyways, Agnes was one of the witches that was captured during this time and tortured and thrown in jail. She was known for her healing potions that worked like magic, and so naturally she was accused of being a witch. They didn't have naturopaths back then, so there's that. Anyways, turns out they were right to accuse her because while in jail, she actually confessed and said that she worshipped Satan and that she even was physically involved with him, if you catch my drift. So yeah, after this, she was sentenced to death. In our number 4 spot, we have Anne Hibbins. In the 1650s, there was a woman by the name of Anne Hibbins who was accused of being a witch. And perhaps she was, but maybe not in the typical way like the others on this list. Perhaps she was just not a great person and her personality was scarier than a demon and she perhaps got what she deserved. Apparently Anne was a very wealthy woman, being very connected, and her brother-in-law was a future governor of Massachusetts and her husband was a civil law officer. Her husband apparently condemned a woman for being a witch. When he passed away, she was left a bit in ruin and she wasn't very well liked. She had sued a bunch of carpenters years prior that her community loved, and that made people hate her. She was then accused of being a witch and sentenced to death. There's not too many reports on her, so it's hard to say if she really was a nasty woman or not, but if she was, then all I can say is this sounds like the case of Queen Karma herself. In our number 3 spot, we have Alice Keitler. Alice Keitler was one of the first witches known in Ireland. She apparently was married 4 times and outlived all of her husbands. Yep, of course that was unusual for this period, which was the 13th century. All of her husbands died mysteriously, and after every one, people grew more and more suspicious of her, naturally. Until her final husband died, then his kids accused her of poisoning him. Eventually, rumors began to spread that she had killed her husbands as offerings to the devil himself. She also wasn't very well liked in the town, so that didn't help her case either. But apparently she had been worshipping him for decades. People began pushing for her to be captured and to have a formal trial, but before they were able to, she fled the country. Thus proving that she probably did kill her husbands. She might not have been a witch, but it's definitely possible she was. In our number 2 spot, we have Malin Matsdottir. Malin and her husband were either evil or they were being possessed, because their story really gives me the creeps. In 1676, Malin's husband was sentenced to death for being inappropriate with an animal. Makes me sick. And Malin was accused of being a witch by her own daughter. Her daughter said that she would worship the devil. Apparently, many young ones went missing in her town, and people believed that she snatched them and sacrificed them. At her trial, she was accused of taking them, and since her daughter was among the accusers, she had no chance. She was sentenced to death. She died without a sound, which confirmed to many that she was a real witch because they apparently don't feel pain. Guys, maybe she was a real witch. If I get too close to the oven and feel the heat, I react. So if I was her, I would have made my exit the most dramatic show anyone would ever see. So dramatic people would laugh and wish they hadn't burned me. In our number 1 spot, we of course have Aleister Crowley. Not all witches are women, folks. Probably the worst witch that I have ever read about was a male, and he was the darkest they come. People called him the wickedest man to have ever existed. Scarier than a demon. In fact, he was probably Satan himself. Of course, I'm speaking of Aleister Crowley, who was alive not too long ago. Close to 100 years ago, he was being kicked out of Italy for his occult gatherings, where it is believed that he channeled Satan and everyone danced naked under the moon. Such fun. He would refer to himself as the Beast or the Antichrist. He traveled around the world promoting his religion called Thelma and promoted his teachings. He wrote many books, including the Book of Thoth, the Book of Lies, and the Book of the Law. The scary thing about Aleister is that people still follow his teachings today.
Starting us off at number 10 is a classic witch. First up, we have a story from Louis 92, and they start off by explaining that their grandfather used to be a rancher in Mexico, and that this was a story he used to tell often when they were young. Quote, one day he said he was patrolling this ranch late at night and he heard a baby crying. Now, the land is pretty flat, so he looked all ways and saw nothing. Maybe some goats out in the far distance, since they sound like crying babies. As he's walking his route, he hears the same sound, looks up in the sky, and he swears he saw a witch with black clothing and everything flying towards a mountain. He panicked, ran to his car, and drove off as fast as he could. I mean, no kidding. If I saw a witch riding a broom in the sky while I was alone at night, I would definitely definitely be freaked out too. Moving on to number 9, a coven. Next up is a story posted to Reddit about 9 years ago from Astrius94, and it would definitely freak me out to say the least. Quote, about 5 years ago, me and my friends were just messing around in a smallish local forest. Basically, we saw in the distance, in a little forest clearing, a group of 4, 5, 6-ish people, what looked like to be wearing black hooded robes, sitting together on the ground quietly. I know it seems typical, but there was no normal reason for anyone to be dressed like that in the middle of a forest. We just all freaked out and ran after watching for about 20 seconds. I still remember the image of them sitting there vividly all these years later. Coming in at number 8, a psychic witch. This next one comes from Reddit user Bubblegum Scent, and they begin by explaining, she knew a woman who lived in the middle of nowhere, really far from town. She went to her one day with her mom. Quote, this woman was eerie, that energy that also scares you because you think she can see through you, but there was nothing wrong with her face or hair or anything. She was average looking, except for her gold grills all around her mouth. She first did a ritual with water and green leaves from a mango tree on us, chanting some stuff we didn't understand and passing these leaves in the fire. She said she needed to clean us of energy from the outside. Reddit friend explains that she's a very private person, so she hadn't shared any details with the woman when she arrived, but when this witch opened her cards, Reddit friend freaked out. Quote, this woman opened her cards and she saw and pointed out skin color, height, eye color, and profession of every single love interest in my life at the time, and which ones were in love and others which were badly intentioned. I was spooked the whole time. This woman knew about travels and work prospects and everything. It was scary. Coming in at number 7, Manchek Swamp. During the 1860s, Julia Brown was a well-respected healer and midwife who resided in a small village called Frenye. At first, she loved caring for her village, but after some time she started to feel disrespected by her community, feeling as though they were taking her gifts for granted. Julia began scaring the village, telling them dooming predictions about their impending deaths, and the townspeople, unsure if she was placing a curse or foretelling their future, became very troubled. Shortly before her own death, she said, one day I'm gonna die and I'm gonna take you all with me. And just days after she was buried, 3 entire villages were destroyed by a hurricane and hundreds of lives were lost. To this day, many believe the spirit of Julia Brown haunts the swamp, and visitors who have visited report hearing blood-curdling screams and the sound of her voice singing cryptic and frightening songs, terrifying all those who walk by. Coming in at number 6, Alice's grave. Alice died in the 19th century, and although she led a fairly normal life while alive, her death and afterlife were anything but. She was laid to rest in an above-ground grave, but soon after, many of the townspeople began to question, was Alice a witch? It said in the middle of the night, the large slab of marble covering her grave was removed on 3 separate occasions, and each time her remains were left outside of her grave. No one stepped forward admitting to have moved Alice or the slab, which led the people to believe that Alice was a witch trying to escape her grave and haunt the town. Eventually, large, heavy iron bars were placed over the grave in an attempt to hold her spirit inside, but this hasn't seemed to stop her, as locals claim you can still see her wandering the wooded cemetery at night. But just exactly what is she looking for? That is one of the many unanswered questions that leave visitors terrified, unsure if she comes in peace or if she is out for revenge. Moving on to number 5. Bell Witch Cave. One of the most well-known haunted locations, the tales of it being haunted by an evil entity go back as far as the early 1800s and have been very well documented throughout the years. As the story goes, sometime in the late 16th century, there was a huge feud between 2 neighbors, John Bell and Kate Batts. Now, Kate believed that John had cheated her somehow on a land deal, and so to seek revenge would routinely harm his daughter. This of course made John act out, and the two spent most of their lives trying to get back at one another. In fact, she was so hell-bent on revenge that the feud even lasted until her very dying breath. On her deathbed, Kate, who was believed by all in the town to be a witch, allegedly cursed the entire Bell family and promised she would haunt them for the rest of eternity. Ever since that day, day. A terrifying entity is said to haunt the cave. Even Andrew Jackson, former president who spent a night there, once famously said, "I would rather face the entire British Army than to spend another night with the Bell Witch." Coming in at number 4, a satanic idol. In 1991, a hunter was walking through the woods on the lookout for deer when he began to feel an overwhelming sense of paranoia. At that very moment, he turned around to see this creepy doll leaned up against a tree staring at him, and he could have sworn that it appeared out of nowhere. Immediately, the hunter knew he should not be here, and so he began walking as quickly as he could to find a way out of the forest. Then, suddenly, an old man dressed in black robes appeared beside him. He looked like a priest, the hunter thought, but something wasn't quite right. Every step he took, the priest matched him, but eventually he decided to ask the priest how to get out of the forest. Creepily, the priest did not speak, instead just pointed off into another direction, turned around, and left the man alone. Now, luckily, the hunter escaped, and the following day, after telling his friends the strange events, they suggested that he reach out to Ed and Lorraine Warren. Upon telling them his story, they explained that the priest was actually a well-known member of a satanic cult, and that the creepy doll he encountered was actually an idol used for ritual purposes. Then the Warrens, being who they were, ventured back into the forest, found the doll, and brought it back home. Soon after, however, strange things began happening. Allegedly, one time Ed was speaking with Lorraine, turned away for a second, looked back, and she was suddenly 30 feet away and passed out on the ground. He called the ambulance, and she spent the next 3 days in hospital, in and out of consciousness, and according to Ed, she actually levitated. Moving on to number 3. Bear Walker. Next up is a story from a now deleted Reddit account about the time they came into contact with a bear walker, which in indigenous cultures is depicted as an evil sorcerer who uses sacred medicines for evil. According to our friend here, quote, "I was 20 years old and very healthy. One night I had a dream I was in a field and was picking wildflowers. From each direction a tornado was coming at me. I woke up in a fevered sweat. That began 2 months of sheer misery. My doctor kept saying that I had a UTI, she would give me antibiotics, and it would subside for a while. I lost 40 pounds in the span of 2 months. By the end of it, I couldn't walk and barely ate." Reddit user says her family grew concerned and convinced her to go to a hospital, and after an ultrasound, they found a huge growth on her ovary. The user continues, quote, "A few days later, I had surgery, and when the doctor came to visit me, he said he had never seen anything like it. It was a yellow, almost concrete-like substance around my ovary. I got better, but my mother remained unconvinced and scheduled an appointment with a medicine man. According to Reddit user, the medicine man said a woman saw her at a powwow, became interested in who she was because of her mother, and must have thrown a piece of medicine in the path which she stepped on. Quote, he asked me if I still felt it. I said yes. He took a bone, what kind I'm not sure, placed it in the area and began to suck. He started vomiting yellow. He gave me medicines and rituals for my mom to do. I went home that night and slept for 13 hours. My sickness never returned." Coming in at number 2, Lechuza. Our next story comes from Reddit user Zerora, and for reference, a Lechuza is a witch that transforms into an owl. Quote, "I was out at a friend's ranch with my buddy, a cousin of mine, a mutual friend, and my buddy's dad. We were putting up some fence posts and barbed wire so we could corral some stray cattle and keep them there until we found the owner. The sun was setting, so we decided to call it a day. We built a bonfire close by and huddled up in an unfinished ranch hand's house. We were drinking and just shooting the breeze and telling stories from high school. Eventually, we got to stories about the paranormal. Once I got to describing the Lechuza, we heard an ungodly screech, almost ear-piercing. We all turned to look in the direction of the screech, and before my eyes can adjust to the darkness, I hear my buddy scream, 'Es una lechuza,' and he hauls ass to the main ranch house a few hundred yards away. I turn back towards the darkness and I see a giant silhouette of an owl perched on one of the posts we had driven in earlier that day. It was massive. Scared shitless, I decided to run back to the ranch. I finally reach the ranch house and my buddy's dad demands to know what is going on. Reddit friend tried to calm him down, but eventually decided he would go to check out if the witch was still there. But when he arrived back at the tree it was perched on, the only thing left were giant claw marks. And last up in our number 1 spot, on the trail. Last up is a story from a now deleted Reddit account, but our Reddit friend begins by saying that they used to live in a really small town as a kid and that they would often play on the trails near the forest after school with their friends. Quote, "One day we were walking a trail and a lady in her mid-50s or 60s came out of the woods. She had dirt all over her hands and pants. She said her car broke down and she needed help. We said we would go tell our parents to come help, but she insisted we come into the woods. We said no and kept walking, and she just stared at us. It was like she just shut off as a person when we told her. The smile went away. Even when we were a couple kilometers down the road, we could see her staring at us. Anyways, we get back to my friends and we're playing tag or something in his backyard, and one of us starts making fun of the lady we saw earlier, and out of nowhere he is launched into his parents' shed, breaks the window and his arm. We all stand in shock. His parents come out and start yelling at us, blaming us and saying we threw him. To this day, we all seem to have the same recurring dream or seeing the woman in the woods, except every time I dream it, she is closer and closer to us.